Thank you for joining the University of Missouri Extension and our workforce partners as we address the topics and resources that are most important to you. I'm Amy Patillo, a field specialist in labor and workforce development at the University of Missouri, and I will be your moderator today. The speakers and I have been working to bring you information and resources that you need now. Industry experts, businesses, and guest speakers will share best practices for employment, labor, and workforce development, and share strategies that work. So stay tuned into the workshop registrations list as we continue to update sessions so that we can respond to what is important to employers, businesses, and communities. Email us and let us know if there's information or requests that are important to you. Joining us today are our industry leaders, Greg Tucker, the director of the Missouri Small Business Development Center, Rob O'Brien, president of O'Brien and Associates, David Gaines, managing director at Goldstone Consulting, and Rob Harrington, economic development director at the City of Houston. Thank you for joining us today. And Greg Tucker is going to let us share information with us about the Missouri Small Business Development Center.
Okay, so I'm going to apologize in advance. I have to jump off after just a few minutes. I do apologize for that, but I'll have my contact information, everyone, for any information you might need. So as Amy said, I'm Greg Tucker, the State Director of the Missouri Small Business Development Centers. I'm also the Education Director of the MU Extension Business Development Programs, which includes the Small Business Development Centers, the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, and the Trade Adjustment Assistance Center. So it's 3 programs across the state that work with primarily small businesses. The SBDC, or the Small Business Development Center, has 13 centers, and we provide low-cost or no-cost training and counseling to Missouri small businesses. So as you can imagine, we are knee-deep right now in Missouri small businesses with the COVID disruption. And I understand that Rob is going to talk specifically about the 3 programs, but to let you know, the programs we're working with right now, in addition to the traditional SBDC counseling and 7A programs, the Paycheck Protection Program, the Small Business Debt Relief Program, and the EIDL Loans program with the Emergency Economic Injury Grants. And for more information on those, you can go to our website, MissouriSBDC.org, and click on our COVID page. Like everyone else in the state, we have a COVID page. And on there, we have an actual video where Sherry Noller will walk applicants step by step through the EIDL loan application. And then there's a video that a webinar I created yesterday that is actually a little obsolete today because some things have changed about the 3 programs as well. Okay, what else would you like, Amy?
Thanks, Greg. Because Greg is going to have to jump off and leave early, if there are questions for Greg, please put it in the chat. And they say they can see my notes. Someone says they can see my notes.
Ah, okay. I don't see them now. I don't see them now.
So you don't see my notes now? I'm sorry. And I don't see any questions coming in. They said they can't see my notes.
Okay.
Good. So if there's any questions for Greg, go ahead and post them in chat.
And I can stay a little bit. I don't need to leave right now, so I can stay a little bit. So I'll listen in for a while.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate it, Greg.
No, thank you, Amy. I appreciate this effort.
Okay, we're going to hand it off to Rob O'Brien now.
And good afternoon. What we're going to do is walk through some of these programs that we've talked about. Greg's alluded to them already, and so we want to give a good sense of what's available out there for companies right now, and what other things that are within the SBA realm that you might be looking at. There are basically 4 programs right now that are being promoted. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the Paycheck Protection Program, which a lot of people are most interested in right now because that is the forgivable loan. There is SBA debt relief, and then there are tax credits or deferments available. Most people are interested in the 2 loan programs. So here's a side-by-side of them. There is the Economic Injury Loan and the Payroll Protection Loan, which is an enhanced 7A loan program through SBA. On the Economic Injury Loan, it's up to $2 million negotiated need. And there is what's called the advanced grant part of that. The advanced grant is $10,000 when you apply for economic injury. That grant is essentially a grant. Whether you are approved for the EIDL loan or not, you get to keep the $10,000. Payroll protection loan is up to $10 million, but it is payroll based, and we'll go into that in a little more detail. The interest rates, economic injury has interest rates for both business and not-for-profits. As you see there, it's 1 point lower for not-for-profits. Payroll protection is essentially 0.5% for the first 2 years, up to the first 2 years. And then if all or a portion of the loan is not forgiven, it goes to a negotiated interest rate with a 4% cap. Terms of the loan, economic injury can be up to 30 years. The payroll protection is 10 years maximum, but it's negotiated with your lender. There is, for economic injury, an automatic 12-month deferral. For payroll protection, there is a 6-month deferral, but it can be negotiated for a longer term. Eligibility are generally similar, as you see here. It's small business, independent contractors, private not-for-profit organizations, co-ops and tribal businesses for economic injury. For the payroll protection, it also includes self-employed, or what we call 1099 contractors. For economic injury, the application goes direct to the SBA, and for payroll protection, it goes actually through qualified lenders, and the SBA is adding additional qualified lenders right now. EIDL is currently open. Payroll protection will start on this Friday, April 3rd. The deadline for application for economic injury is toward the end of this year, but payroll protection has a relatively short window of time, just until June 20. So going into the more specifics on the programs, the economic injury disaster loan, that is really an SBA standing program that they use in a lot of disasters. There's a little bit of change for COVID. There is no use for growing firms, only those with a loss, and no use for homeowners or renters, which SBA has used in more typical disasters. As we talked about, it includes that $10,000 advance grant. The EIDL applications are actually set back automatically to the end of January, so the grant is qualified. And as we mentioned, you get to keep it. Economic injury can be used with the Paycheck Protection Program in the CARES Act. So there are some opportunities there for those to overlap. As we mentioned, here's the amounts, the eligible entities. The uses are fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, and other bills that cannot be paid due to the impact of the coronavirus. There is collateral required over $25,000 in loans. SBA makes a point to say that they will not decline a loan but they do need a pledge then of any collateral that is available. There are forms required. It's pretty straightforward loan as is typical. You need your application. You have an IRS form to fill out, your most federal income tax return, the personal financial statement, and the schedule of liability are some of the forms that you'll need. Assistance can be offered through the Small Business Development Center, as Greg has already touched on. They're a great resource. Also, the Women's Business Centers and SCORES. And if you want to make a direct application, here's the link to get you to the direct application website. We'll give you a moment to write it down here. It is https://disasterloan.sba.gov/ELA/ if you're not seeing it on the screen. So that is, again, a more typical program and one that can be applied for right now. Paycheck Protection Program that everyone is very interested in right now. It is essentially an enhanced 7A program under SBA. It has a $10 million cap instead of the typical 5. It does have a lower interest rate cap at 4% instead of 6% or plus. And it encourages continued employment by forgiving the loan with qualifications. Now, this one is going through your lending institutions. And right now, there are a number of banks that are already qualified SBA lenders, but they are also adding additional ones, including some farm credit agencies. So it is not direct to SBA, it goes through your lending community. And it can be used with EIDL and with other SBA loans. Here's how they take a look at it. If you are operating, if you have been in business since February 15th of 2019, this window of time, February 15, 2019 to June 30 of 2019, not this year, last year, then you calculate your average monthly payroll cost and then take that by a factor of 2.5. So essentially, what it's looking at is something like a 10-week period of time. That's your loan. Companies that have seasonal workers can opt to choose March 1 start date, a little bit later, to get them a little farther into the spring season. If your company is younger than that, if you were not operating in that February to June 2019 window, then you look at your cost in this year between January 1 and February 29. And again, it is your monthly payroll cost times a factor of 2.5 times. So that is how the loan level is determined. It's basically your monthly payroll cost in these windows times 2.5 to get the loan maximum that you can request. If you've already requested an economic injury disaster loan since February 15th of this year, you can refinance it into the payroll protection. So who are the eligible entities? Small businesses under 500 employees, restaurants and hotels, and that's in the NAICS code 72, with under 500 employees per physical location. And then, of course, sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed individuals as defined in the Families First Act. And David Gaines will touch on the Family First Act when we finish this side to give you a sense of that. Essentially, 501c3 not-for-profit organizations and other private not-for-profits, veterans organizations, and tribal businesses. So here's how they look at payroll. What constitutes payroll? It's the direct compensation. It's also paid vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave. So vacation and sick and family leaves are all covered as part of the payroll if they're paid by the company. Company paid dismissal or separation dollars, group health care benefits, including insurance, a retirement benefit, and your state and local taxes on compensation of employees. So your state payroll taxes, for example, are covered under what is payroll on there. However, there are some exclusions. Employee owner compensation over 100,000, the taxes imposed or withheld on that amount on those. The employees whose principal place of residence is outside of the U.S. and qualified sick and family leave on which you get a credit as a business under the Family First Coronavirus Act. So there are some exclusions, but basically what we see on that first chart are included when you consider what constitutes my payroll. The nice thing on this particular program is there's no collateral required. However, you have to make good faith certifications that the loan is necessary to keep your business running. The funds will be used for employee payroll, that you really don't have a pending application for the same purpose right now with SBA, or that you have already received a loan for the same purpose under the SBA. And right now they are revising the 7A forms for applications. So stay tuned on that, but that's a work in progress and coming soon. We've talked about the payroll costs, but how else can you use the funds received? You can also use it for mortgage interest payments. You can use it for rent. If you don't have a mortgage, you can use it for utilities. You can also use it for interest on any other debt incurred before the covered period. So there's beyond payroll, there are several other uses that you can use payroll protection program loan for. Here generally is how you get to calculate if you're forgiven or not on this. Forgiveness is based on the payroll cost incurred during your covered period. So once the loan is out there, you have your covered period of time of about 10 weeks that you get. And then you will compare that to the payroll cost and other costs compared the previous year or another time period agreed upon. And it will be proportionate to maintaining employees and wages except for those over that $100,000 line. And again, those items you can roll in are your direct payroll cost plus your mortgage interest payments or your rent payments or your utility payments. However, SBA has offered guidance, since this is a competitive loan application, that they would like to see 75% go to payroll. So keep that in mind when you're getting ready to make your application. 75% to payroll. It goes through your lender. Anything that is not forgiven is carried forward out to 10 years at a 4% interest rate. Principal and interest deferred as originally. Your clock does not start again. So basically, you don't get to start the clock and say, now I have 10 years from the time I got my first 2 years in. It is 10 years. These do coordinate with your other SBA programs and also investments from small business investment corporations. However, none of these can be used for the same purposes. And so when you do the PPP, as mentioned before, SBA likes to see 75% committed to payroll. So it's important to anything else you get to directed in other directions, such as mortgage and utilities. Your application, Treasury, as we mentioned, is qualifying other applicants. It will open this Friday, and they anticipate having final forms and guidance by next Friday. And again, small business development centers and women business centers and SCORE are outlets for that. A couple of other programs that are out there. Businesses that have current non-disaster SBA loans, either a 7A, 504, or microloan, can get a request in for debt relief. SBA will pay the loans for 6 months, including principal, interest, and fees. New loans taken on those programs for 6 months from signing of the bill. So basically 6 months right now is started, can qualify for future relief, but it does not apply to the direct to disaster loans, either the PPP or the economic injury loans. So keep that in mind. If you look at the other ones, standard 7A, 504 microloans, you can on down the road ask for that relief. There's also tax assistance with an employee retention tax credit, deferral of payroll taxes, but again, companies with the payroll protection program loan cannot use either of those two. So as you go through that and you consider whether those payroll tax deferrals and employee retention tax credits are valuable, consider that against PPP because you will not qualify for those. So for companies or not-for-profits that are facing closure or economic hardship because of government-ordered commerce and travel restrictions, or if you can show a greater than 50% quarterly revenue loss year over year, can apply for the tax credit. The credits are 50% of wages, health benefits of employees against the first $10,000 in wages. Companies under 100 can be all employees counted, not just furloughed employees, but there is no credit for the required paid sick and family leave, and you have an application period for those expenses through December 31 of 2020. Payroll tax deferral, it allows deferral of your federal taxes for this year. It includes FICA, it includes railroad retirement, and for those self-employed, it includes half of your tax liability, and then you'll pay it in 2 lump sums at the end of 2021 and 2022. So here's the bottom line. You need to get your tax records, financials, employee documentation together. Don't have a knee-jerk reaction that you have to run out and apply for a loan, because first you really need to think about your short-term needs against your long-term goals. Review against the programs. For example, if you're a smaller business and you're looking at the payroll protection loan versus economic injury, which has a $2 million cap, you might be better off going with economic injury. You also may consider how you're dealing with your current employment and recognizing your employment may still fall. You may be better off to furlough employees and let them take the enhanced unemployment versus PPP loan. Those are just a couple of examples. Obviously, a lot more to think about. And of course, get some professional guidance from your accountant or your CPA and SBDC assistance. There are 13 of the centers around the state, and they're here to help you through the SBDCs and give you guidance. And finally, if you'd like a copy of the U.S. Senate's guides to the SBA programs with the U.S. Chamber's Small Business Loan Checklist, or this presentation, you can feel free to email me at rob@o'brienassociates.com, rob@o'brienassociates.com. So hopefully that's some insight on that. As we said, we're matching that against the Family First coronavirus. And so David Gaines at this point is going to talk about the Family First program.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And those of you who I have yet to meet and I don't know, I'm David Gaines from Goldstone Consulting Group. We're a Missouri-based economic development and site selection consulting firm. So I want to thank you all for taking time to be with us this afternoon. I know we're throwing a lot of information at you, but this is all part of the $2.2 trillion Economic Relief or Stimulus Act that the president signed into law just Friday afternoon. So I've been looking at some of those questions popping up in the chat. Some of these rules have yet to be handed out because some of these programs are just coming online. So a lot of those questions or those answers to those questions will be coming to you shortly. But my section of today's program is about the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. This is a part of that large piece of legislation. It is an expansion of the Family Medical Leave Act, and it actually goes into play today. April 1st, today, this portion of the law takes effect, and it applies to companies with fewer than 500 employees. This is a short-lived piece of legislation. It's scheduled to end December 31st, 2020. So if you hear me say things like should be, could be, maybe, supposed to be, that kind of thing, just know that some of these things may change depending upon how long this economic condition exists and how long this pandemic exists. We can see that this thing is still growing, and so there's still a lot of time for it to play through. This particular part of the legislation, if you are an employer that has less than 50 employees, you may qualify for an exemption. And so how do you get to determine whether you're 50 employees or not? We know we have someone on the call that has locations in 2 states. So you add up all those employees. If you have 50 or less between those 2 locations, then you could potentially qualify for an exemption. And there's 3 main categories of things that might help you qualify for that exemption. And at the end of this presentation, we'll give you an 800 number to check on these things for yourself. But if paying a paid leave causes your company to cease operation because revenues aren't making expenses, that might be a qualifying exemption for you. Or if the absence of those employees that request for or qualify for leave would cause your company to cease operation, they have a certain skill that the company can't survive without, that might be a qualifying exemption. And then lastly, if there's not enough employees left after those that qualify for leave take leave and the company has to shut down, that too could be a qualifying exemption. All of your employees, oops, a little bit too fast. All of your employees, if you're a covered employer, are eligible for up to 2 weeks of paid leave under this act. Those employees that you've recently hired since March the 2nd, within the last 30 days, that would be March the 2nd, they are not eligible. So your long-term employees, those that have been faithful and been with you for years, or those that you hired prior to February 28th or 29th, those employees then qualify to participate in the paid leave part of the program. There is an additional 10 weeks of paid family leave that these employees could qualify for under certain circumstances, and we'll talk about that a couple times more through this presentation, and it's related to their closure of schools. With all of the public schools and I believe all of the private schools as well in the state of Missouri being closed, then that's going to cover just about any employee that you have that has children in school, that those children can't attend school or can't access daycare because daycares are closed or whatever the case may be related to the COVID-19 virus situation. Those employees then could qualify for an additional 10 weeks. Those employees who don't qualify are those who are working from home, those who are telecommuting or teleworking or doing what we're doing here with conference calls and video conferencing. If they can still access your computer systems, their voicemail, their emails, and they can continue to function in their job from home, those employees don't qualify. And some examples might be those in your engineering department that can keep working remotely, in the sales department or the customer service department or the accounting department. Those that are not in the office that can keep working from home, they don't qualify for the paid leave because they still have a job to go to. There's 6 reasons for 6 reasons or 6 triggers that sets an employee in that eligibility stage. Number 1, if they have a federal, state, or local quarantine order from their local government or local healthcare related to the COVID virus, then they could qualify for that paid leave. And with many communities, my community is one, and I know there are multiple around the state of Missouri and those in Illinois and other places that are looking at stay-at-home orders for non-essential employees. This could play particular effect on those employees. If you have an employee that's been advised by their doctor, their physician, their nurse practitioner, their family, or their physician's assistant, or even somebody from the health department to self-quarantine because they're suspected of being exposed to the virus, that's a qualifying event. And of course, if they have symptoms, we certainly don't want them to come to work and try to affect the rest of the employees and the staff. But if they have symptoms and they're self-quarantined and waiting on test results, that's a qualifying event. In many places, test results are taking anywhere between 3 to 7 days to get a positive or to just get the results of a COVID-19 test. So unfortunately, those employees are going to be those that can't participate in work at the work location. The 4th qualifying event is those employees who, again, are subject to an order of self-quarantine. And then the 5th one, those who are staying home because the children's school or daycare is closed and they don't have access to that. So again, that's that broad category that I think will catch up a lot of employees into the net because the schools are closed and many of the daycares have followed suit. And then the 6th one, which is a broad-ranging one as well, if the secretaries of Human and Health Services, Labor, and Treasury come together and say that there's a similar situation to the COVID virus that requires someone to quarantine, then that could be a qualifying event. So there's some wiggle room in there for any future issues that might come over the next 9 months or so that this act or this legislation is effective. Leave duration, your full-time employees, it's 80 hours. Your basic 40-hour work week, they qualify for that. Your part-timers, it's an average of their number of hours over a 2-week period. So if you've had an employee that typically averages about 20 hours a week for you, they would then qualify for 40 hours of paid leave. The asterisk, an extra 10 weeks of potential paid leave because of school closures or daycare, inaccessibility daycare closures. So again, a really broad range that could scoop in quite a bit of employees. So this is how you calculate the compensation for those employees. It's your regular payroll rate for that employee or the minimum wage, whichever is higher, up to $511 per day. So you multiply that by 10 times to get to the 80-hour work week, and you could see, or the 80-hour pay period, and you could see that that could be a fairly expensive paid leave for those higher end employees. The other option is the 2/3 rate and the 2/3 of the minimum wage with the highest daily rate of $200. That applies to that extended period of that 10-week leave because of the children not being able to go to daycare or go to school. So for the first 2 weeks, they're going to be at their regular rate. And then that 10-week period, then they're going to be at that 2/3 rate of their minimum wage. And in Rob O'Brien's presentation earlier, there are programs that will help the company if they have employees that are qualifying for that paid leave, to be able to make those payments to those employees. So don't panic. Everybody's going to get a check and you're not going to have funds. There's programs out there to help you. Those of you who are listening on the call and can't see the call, that toll-free number to the U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hourly Division is 866, the number 4, U.S. Wage. That's 866 4 U.S. Wage, W-A-G-E. That's the call center that's been established by the Department of Labor to handle your calls as an employer for questions about whether or not your company qualifies, whether or not the employee qualifies. And I want to encourage you to document everything. The employee should have a written request or an email asking for leave. The employee should have that note from the healthcare provider saying that they should take leave because they are suspected to have been exposed to or have positively contracted the coronavirus. You want to document in writing all of your communications because that's going to be a part of that ongoing process for you. Also want to encourage you to reach out to, as Rob had said, to your accountant and your legal advisors. I know a lot of the attorneys and the CPAs, there's a few here on the call with us today, are working just as diligently as everybody else trying to understand the different quirks and scenarios with this huge piece of legislation. So don't be afraid. You don't have to go it alone. There are resources out there for you. I want to encourage you to keep standing up as a company owner, as a company manager, and moving forward. At some point in time, you had a great idea for a company. It's been of value to your community. It's been of value to you, of course. And more importantly, it's been a great value to your employees. So there are resources here to work with you, whether it's in all 114 counties in the state of Missouri through the University of Missouri Extension, or as Rob and Greg had mentioned earlier, through the Small Business Development Centers. And I also want to encourage you to reach out to your local economic development office in your community or in your region as a resource. There are a lot of us out here that are gathering this data and these tools to be able to help you and your company in this time. But remember, this too shall pass. So if we keep working together, I think we'll get through both the economic impact, the communities, and this pandemic impact to the community. So again, thank you for your time. And the next one is Rob. As soon as I get that screen that allows me to stop sharing my computer screen with you. There we go. Rob O'Brien, I think, or Rob Harrington, I think it's your turn now.
Well, hello. I am trying to get my screen to show me there. Sorry about that.
There we go.
Can everybody see my program? Everybody see that? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Can you make it bigger, like the whole screen, like the two previous ones?
Let me see.
I know I'm a pain.
No, it should have went like that. Jane, me and technology do not work here.
Jason, no comment.
Let's see, Amy, or how do I do that?
I think that if you look at display settings, that you're on the presenter view.
Oh,
There you go.
Is that better?
Oh,
There
there.
you go.
Yay.
Yeah.
Rob.
Teach John's new tricks.
Good job.
Thank you. Again, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. For those of you who do not know who I am, my name is Rob Harrington, and I am the Economic Development Director for the city of Houston, Missouri. I've been in this position since about October of 2018, and before then I was in several other locations doing economic development, mainly in the rural areas. So what I'm going to be talking to you today about are USDA, EDA programs, and some other programs that are outside maybe the whole state, but specifically to certain regions. So first of all, USDA programs, a lot of these programs, to be honest with you, are going to be more for a community-based than they are business-based. But I wanted to cover them so that we would be able to, for those that are on here that are economic developers, chambers, could look and see how they could help their local communities. So rural housing and services for single-family housing, this is effective March 19th. With borrowers with the USDA. There are several programs, 3 programs exactly, a guaranteed loan program. Most of us know what that is. You go to your local bank with a government-backed loan for guaranteed loan programs. There's the direct loan program. I'm going to move this so I can see. Sorry. The direct loan program, which is, excuse me, which the USDA has waived or relaxed certain parts of the application process for single-family housing direct loans, including site assessments, and has extended the time period that certificates of eligibility are valid. Again, direct loan borrowers are your best bet for these programs. And then again, a multifamily housing program. USDA really doesn't have exact programs based off of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we're just going to try to touch on these that are always available. And I would say to reach out to your local USDA in person or economic developer in your area to get those. Rural business cooperative services against, this used to be called RBOGs. Now it's just RBDGs. This program, there has been a deadline extension till April 15th, so it is coming up, but they're very easy to fill out. Your USDA individuals can help you fill these out. I've found that you can get some of these filled out if you already have a lot of the information rather quickly, a week or so, and get that in. These are great programs for local communities with several different uses that can be used for. EDA programs, again, just like USDA, EDA really doesn't have anything particular to COVID-19. They have been talking about coming out with some different funds. I believe there was some funds in the EDA program in the latest bill that came out of Washington. But again, those funds were really used to just bolster some of the programs that they already currently have. Some of those economic adjustment, that's for states and local interests in designing and implementing strategies to adjust to bring about change to an economy. This would be a great program for individuals in the community to really start talking about strategies for disasters. The best thing, as Rob O'Brien could probably tell you, the best thing for you to do is to plan out. This pandemic is something new to us, but living in Missouri, disasters are not. We are very familiar with flooding, tornadoes, and other disasters that do happen here. And so the economic adjustment program through EDA would be a great program to take advantage of to help with planning for the next coming disaster. The other thing I would say with this is it will also help you with like revolving loan fund program, which supplies small business entrepreneurs with gap financing needed to start or expand their business. The trade adjustment assistant for firms, this is a good one for anybody who does exporting to other countries. the 11 trade adjustment assistance centers to help strengthen the competitiveness of American companies that have lost domestic sales and employment because of increased imports of similar goods. Again, this is specifically for any individual or company that exports. And I would also say that if you need help with this program, a great person to reach out to would be Ann Pardalis at the state. She runs the Import-Export division of the Department of Economic Development, and she could help you with navigating through this EDA program. And then just an economic adjustment program. Again, it's basically for states and local interest. And again, implementing strategies for upcoming disasters. And most of your regional councils of governments will be working with EDA to create CEDS, community economic development strategies. Contact those community governments. They would have a CEDS and they could help you with some of this planning as well. This one specifically is for Southeast Missouri. Mr. Sadler from Perryville could take advantage of Delta Regional Authority, as well as myself and others in this region. It runs pretty much south of I-44 from the Phelps County line clear down to the Boot Hill, about as far west as my county, Texas, down to Howell and over. So if you find yourself in this region, the Delta Regional Authority is a great location to look for help. Similar to the Tennessee Valley Authority, this program was specifically set up by Congress to help those specific regions with communities that find themselves in specific economic troubles. Some of the programs they offer, community health systems. This is a pilot program that they have, and it actually will come in and help with your local rural hospitals with some technical assistance. From what I understand, I'll also do health clinics and other health care organizations as well. So right now, rural hospitals find themselves in troubled times. This community health system program can be there to help, especially during a pandemic that we all see today. The Delta Doctors Program. This is a unique program where the Delta Regional Authority will offer J-1 visa waivers to the State Department for medical school graduates from other countries to come over and practice in your local hospitals and clinics. Again, we find ourselves at a time where local healthcare is, it's hard to find doctors. And during a time such as now with COVID-19, the need for doctors and nurses has never been more greater. And so this program would be a great program for local smaller communities in this region to take advantage of. And then finally, the Delta Region Community Health Systems, again, similar to what the community, it's the same one. I just noticed that. So it's supposed to, basically there's another program that Delta Regional Health Systems, or the Delta Regional Authority provides, and I do not have that, I'm sorry. So, so finally, other programs. Local Regional Council of Governments, I mentioned that before. They have several opportunities to work with DED, the Department of Economic Development, the Delta Regional Program, EDA, and others to help you with grants and other programs that those corporations provide, organizations provide. Your local rural electrical cooperatives. A lot of people don't realize this, but a lot of those rural cooperatives have revolving loan funds for small businesses that they provide utilities to. So reach out to them as well and see if they have a revolving loan fund. Sometimes they can help out not only with revolving loan funds, but with utility costs as well, especially during times such as this. Your community foundations. This is another resource that I feel like is underutilized. Many communities, whether it be mine or the Houston Community Foundation, I know Joplin has one, and some other communities throughout the state. Reach out to those community foundations. The Community Foundation of the Ozark has recently started a new program that has up to, I believe it's $1 million for help with the COVID-19 virus pandemic and with some businesses and communities. So reach out to your local community foundation, see if they're working with larger community foundation organization that's doing those. And then David mentioned your local governments, your economic developers. I know here in Houston, we've been discussing opportunities where we can help out local businesses, whether it be utility waivers or even small grants to help with some of the expenses that some of these smaller businesses are having since this COVID-19 started in the shutdown. So mine was short and sweet because I didn't have any important things to talk about. They gave me all the stuff outside, but the only thing I could say, the one thing I want to say is please remember social distancing. You know, if you don't have to be out, don't be out, stay home. You know, I think the best way to fight this virus is to do what, you know, the president and the governor has asked, is to kind of stay home and keep your distance and not be out. Because I think, you know, as David said, this too shall pass. And if we all work together and have that personal responsibility, as the governor keeps talking about, I think we'll get through this and see a light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And now I believe, Amy, you're going to open it up for questions, correct?
Yes, we have some questions coming in, and I'm going to open it up to our group to answer those. Our first question: if I've already applied for the EIDL loan, the EIDL loan, and have received the application number, is there a way to go in and check on the progress of that application?
There is, and actually within the chat, our friend from the SBDC has actually talked about that. Basically, looking at SBA disaster loan website, and that gets you back into the website so you can see where you're at based on that essentially loan number. So again, because it's a direct loan, you go on back to the SBA disaster loan website to track where you're at. And
Okay.
note that as we saw when they first opened it up, it is a site that is still getting a lot of transactions. So either be patient or think about doing it late at night or very early in the morning.
If the EIDL amount is $10,000 or less, is this just a grant?
Essentially, if you have applied for 10,000 or less, and frankly, you may as well apply for the 10,000 because this becomes what they call the advance on the loan, and whether or not you are approved for it, that 10,000 is a grant. Essentially, those are your dollars. No payment.
And speaking about qualifying for the EIL, what is the qualifying criteria?
Well, we talked about the companies that are qualified in that, and again, it's small businesses under 500, not-for-profits that are essentially private not-for-profits. The not-for-profits that have religious or political missions are excluded from that. They also, tribal businesses count in that. The other thing that people should recognize in that is that it is essentially a loan, and it is in many respects just like your bank loan. And so you do need to have a decent credit rating. In the past, we know that there's an impact currently, but in the past, and that there are the forms to fill out and going through the process as you would for any loan. But basically, it is for small business, for private not-for-profits, for tribal businesses, and also independent contractors. That's a requirement. And that is, again, essentially you would have to be what people would say, quote unquote, bankable, typically because you've had a good track record to date. The other thing that we mentioned too before was that the SBA, anything over $25,000 requires collateral, but it doesn't have to be fully collateralized. So they will ask for whatever collateral that they can accept, and that becomes pledge against that.
You did make mention of the credit rating. So one of our questions is the business's credit rating taking into consideration regarding that EIDL loan?
The credit, well, basically they're looking at what we saw, and we had a number of companies that applied post the Joplin tornado. I led the Chamber of Commerce then. We had actually an SBA loan center on site with us post tornado, and they do look basically at the credit rating, if you will. But I wouldn't let that be a deterrent. If you've had essentially pretty good financials for the last year or two until COVID hit, then I would say they're going to take a look at how you were doing prior to that COVID impact. And they're also, again, that's where the collateral can play a role in helping bolster the loan. But as we saw in the post-Joplin tornado, SBA does treat that much as they would a loan in that regard. So anything that you would think about going to your bank for a loan, think about for SBA. It's not the same with the payroll protection program. There's no collateral required, and really in that context, they're looking at the good faith effort to maintain your employment.
So just to remind everyone, following the event, we are recording it, and we will make that recording available as well as handouts from today. We have some questions coming in, and we will be sure to follow up with the recording from today and also the handouts. So I think there's another question for you. Is there any resources that are available for small businesses that are classified as agriculture?
I'll jump in on that one. Yes, we reached out to several weeks ago in the state of Missouri. The Department of Economic Development started reaching out to the economic development professionals in the community. And one of those questions that was posed was, in our rural communities, which is a vast majority of the state of Missouri, farmers are an essential small business component to those communities. Many of those farmers employ 3, 4, 5, and some of the bigger ones are getting up into the double digits of numbers of employees. So I want to tell you from my point of view that a farm agricultural company is part of that program, or part of those companies that can receive some support. So I would encourage you to reach out to your local economic development professional in your community. And if you don't have one, because not every community has one, go to the University Extension and talk to those folks, because everybody is working on trying to be of resource to the business owner in our communities.
Thank you, David. Another question, in regards to the 504, the 6-month principal and interest deferment, is the principal and interest accrued for later payment?
Yes. If you are looking on the SBA debt relief program and applying for that, and that is basically for the 7A, 504, and microloans. And if you are accepted on that, then the SBA pays the principal, interest, and fees for 6 months. So they're not pushing those back or essentially deferring those. They're just covering the cost for that month period of time. Note again, though, it does not apply to economic injury or the payroll protection loans. Those are debt relief on existing SBA loans that a company may have, or a company could apply for those loans during this window of time and ask on down the road for debt relief if they're unable to service the loans.
Okay, so pharmacies have been classified as a healthcare provider. Do you have more firm information available on if they choose to go ahead and pay the EFMLA or sick leave, would they be eligible for the tax credit?
Rob, Brian, I think that's a question more directed at you because of the tax credit for that question.
Yeah, and that's one that's so specific to that sector. I would come back to the advice again of saying, take a look at that question with your CPA or your accountant or your attorney to really make sure that you understand the nuances in that specifically, because that is really related to that healthcare arena as well.
That's great advice. Thank you. So not everyone is able to see the chat log. Some of our participants are joining by phone, and David had answered this in the chat, but we're going to go ahead and review it again for the people joining us by phone. I've heard that employers are not allowed to ask for a letter from a healthcare professional for proof that employees are unable to come to work. Can you provide a follow-up to that?
Yeah, and I think the way I answered that in the chat was many of the county health departments are monitoring the individuals that either are suspected or confirmed folks affected by the COVID-19 virus. And they are bound by the HIPAA, the privacy section of the HIPAA law, not to reveal their name. I can tell you that they are revealing the street address to the 911 centers so that at least the first responders, if they have to go there, know to take the appropriate precautions, but that doesn't help you from a business owner. But from a business owner's standpoint, I'd encourage you to document any other way that you would normally do when you're doing, let's say, a workman's comp case because of an injury and somebody needs to be off from work. I think if you treat it the same way as you would do that, respect the privacy of the individual, that at least it will give you that ammunition to document it. And hopefully you won't have employees who will try to play a game with you and try to take advantage of this to get some extra time away from the job and get paid for it at the same time.
David, I believe that this addresses what you've already said, but the question is, if HIPAA prevents or limits validating the employee's claims, how does the employer control the misuse of FFCRA?
And that's going to be a tricky one. And I don't think I have any clear direction or advice for the participant in asking that question, but to encourage you to document it the best way you can so that you cover the company's position and have those records in the event that you need them for whatever action might come later.
Thank you. This is the last of our questions, but it's also our last opportunity to engage with our industry leaders and ask questions. Just a reminder that the event is being recorded, and we will share that recording following the meeting today. It does take a bit of time for Zoom to send that link to me, especially with it being an hour-long recording. But we will get that recording out, as well as handouts from our presenters. Are there any more questions before we wrap up?
Amy, I would like to touch on something, I got this off a question that David answered earlier. or was answering. Just for those individuals who don't have an economic development director in their area, like David said, reach out to your extension office. But you can also go to ded.mo.gov and look up all those programs that our local, our state economic development organizations offering. You can get information on SBA programs and all the other programs that were talked about today. And most areas of the state has a project manager that, if you don't have an economic developer, would be more than happy to come out and visit with your company and talk to them about the possible tax credits available through state economic development and some other programs. So again, that's ded.mo.gov. Look on that program. They've got a lot of great workforce programs like the shared work program and other things that some of your businesses can take advantage of.
One other thing to mention is, and Amy, you can follow up for folks with more detail, but next week we're going to talk a little bit more about specific disaster programs and tips, and some of the things there to start looking ahead, particularly for communities and counties. Rob Harrington touched on some of those today, and we'll go into some more detail, as well as some of the things. For example, we did post the Joplin tornado, and David Gaines is doing with the community of Brunswick right now from the Missouri floods. So if that's of interest, we encourage folks to join us again next week.
Okay, we have a couple of comments coming then that I'd like to share. David Gaines says that hopefully this has been of value to you. Stand tall and keep moving forward. And then Rob Russell has shared the Department of Labor link to agencies there in the chat, which I will also share that link out. And I do appreciate all of our presenters. Those are excellent. That's excellent advice. Check with our economic developers, work with your Missouri Small Business Development Center counselors. Those contact numbers have been provided. The contact information and emails have been provided for all of our presenters. I will also include that in the follow-up email. So thanks for joining MU Extension today and our featured industry leaders as we share information and resources that are important to you right now. If it is important to you, it is important to us. Email your questions and topics of interest to MU Extension or myself. We had some additional topics of interest posted in the chat that our group will follow up on and incorporate that into the additional webinars that we're working to develop. The webinar series strives to respond quickly to the developing needs of employers, businesses, and communities. Like Rob O'Brien said, we encourage you to register for the upcoming webinars. Our next session is on April 8th, when we share information on how rural businesses are impacted through economic development and disaster recovery strategies. And we'll stay online for a few more minutes to answer questions and take your comments, but thank you again for coming. And I will follow up with an email to all of our participants that registered today. Thank you.
That's a perfect example of why you don't write a PowerPoint when you're sick.